All right, buyers, today we're going to get you that winning offer.
You better get fired up.
All right, check this action out. I've got 12 great ways that you can get your offer to look a little bit better as a buyer. But I will say this, you don't necessarily want to take all these recommendations and put them in your offer, right? There are reasons you would want to do some of these things, and there are reasons you wouldn't want to do some of these things. It depends on the market. It depends on your situation. It depends on the seller's situation. It depends on a lot, right? So I'm going to get into some of this, but really when it comes down to it, you want to have a great in-depth conversation with your agent. I will also say you want to mirror the strength of your offer to A, the value of the property, right? And B, your motivation. So that implies a couple things. Number one, when it comes to the value of the property, I'll tell you, every listing I've ever had, 100% of those sellers expect you to do a little research and understand what the value of their property is. All of them, they all want it, they all expect it, and a listing agent just does it. It's a natural part of the process, right? But for whatever reason, buyers don't expect the same thing from buyer's agents. And I think that's crazy. I think every buyer's agent, before you put an offer in, should tell you if the home is overpriced, underpriced, and by how much. And I'll give you an example why. You might be looking at a $450,000 home and you say, Joe, let's come in 10 grand under at 440, and you get it and you're excited. But then you find out the property's worth 430, or even worse, you never find out. You don't know that you overpaid by 10 grand, but you did because they were 20 grand overpriced, right? Here's another scenario. 450, you come in at 440 and you lose the home to somebody who paid 460 because it was underpriced and it was really worth 470. And you could have come in at 465 or 470, paid full market because they were underpriced, and you would have won the home, and you would have won it at either market value or even 5 grand under value, right? So really knowing the value of that property, to me, in my opinion, is critically important, right? And then going to motivation. Motivation is important too. If you like the house, but there's a plan B and a plan C and a plan D, and all of those options are pretty readily available, well, then you can negotiate a little bit, right? Because if you lose plan A, it's not really that big of a deal. But in a lot of scenarios, plan A has such a big gap between it and plan B that a lot of times I'll say, hey, if I'm understanding this correctly, you would really be devastated if you lost plan A because plan B has such a big gap between it and your plan A. For that reason, I think we need to come in strong with plan A. Would you be okay with plan B? No. Okay, well, then let's strengthen up this plan A offer, right? Because we don't want to lose. Whereas if plan B is also going to work, then we can try a little bit on plan A, right? Makes sense. So with that in mind, let's get into these 12 things. Number one, price matters most. It just does, right? So the more you come up in price, the better chances you are, the better chances you have. And a lot of people are going to say, yeah, but Joe, I don't want to come in 50 grand over price. Would I pay 50 grand? Maybe you love the property. Maybe you would come in 50 grand over, 30 or 20 or 100 or whatever it is. It doesn't matter. Okay, great. But I don't want to give up that 50 grand just to give up 50 grand. Cool. Now you can put in what's called an escalation clause, right? So let's go back to that $450,000 home. And let's say you would pay $500,000. What you can do is add an escalation clause. That escalation clause is going to say something to the effect. You can edit pretty much everything I'm about to say. We're going to give you 455. So now you're only coming in 5 grand over. We're going to give you 455, but we'll come in 5,000 higher than the next best offer, capped at 500 grand. So now if no offer comes in, or maybe a 420 offer comes in, boom, you get it for 455. If an offer comes in at 462, you would automatically be at 467 because you come in 5 grand over the next highest, right? If an offer comes in at 498, you would be at 503, except you put in a 500 cap, so you'd be at 500. You're still higher, but you're only 2 grand higher instead of 5 grand higher, right? So you would still be in the lead price-wise, right? Assuming all your terms are okay, maybe you'd still win it. You'd probably still win it. Now, if that other offer is at 502, you're going to come up to 500. So now they're beating you in price. But my gosh, they're 52 above, and you kind of capped yourself at 50 grand. So in that situation, with all those different numbers I threw out, you would be where you want to be. You can do an escalation clause. What it does is it helps you up your price if needed and only if needed. And they have to show you, according to that escalation clause, the other contract, right? So that will help you with price if you're also trying to limit some of the risk. Here's the second thing. Closing date. Closing date is pretty big for some people. For other people, they don't really care, right? I got a lot of folks who, maybe they live in a rental and it's month to month, or they've got a, home and they're buying a second home and they got plenty of cash so they can own both homes at the same time. It's not a big deal. Maybe they even intend to own both homes at the same time. Or maybe it's a first-time home buyer. They live with mom and dad. It's not a big deal if we close in 30 days or in 150 days, right? What a phenomenal opportunity. If I've asked you as a realtor that particular information and you tell me it's not really a big deal, great. Now I can come back to the listing agent and say, tell me a little bit about the seller's intent when it comes to timeline. They're usually pretty open with that. And if they say they absolutely have to sell ASAP, so we're talking 30 days is preferable. If we can get 40, 45 at most, but man, that would be great. Man, that's a huge term that we can use. So now maybe on that $450,000 home, we're at 445. Another offer comes in at 450, but that one's got a 60-day close. We get a 30, and that's what wins it for you, right? How did that happen? Because we asked the question. You want a realtor who's going to aggressively and proactively reach out and ask that simple question. If you can get that and it's not a big deal to you when you close, man, the terms are what got it done there, not just the price, okay? Number 3, your escrow deposit. Now, you don't really risk your escrow deposit unless all of your contingencies are gone and you still are trying to back out, right? And even then, you've got some things you can do. So the odds of you losing an escrow deposit are pretty low. And when I say that, let me give you a couple examples. Let's say you've got an inspection contingency. Well, during that period in Florida, you can get out for any reason. I don't like the shade of the light bulb. I don't like the carpet, the way it's woven. Whatever, it doesn't matter. You can get out for any reason at any time. If you get through that contingency, and that's the only contingency you have, and now you're trying to get out, now you're risking losing that escrow deposit. In fact, you're also risking what's called specific performance, which means if the seller wants to force you to purchase the home and you have the ability to, they could bring it to court and try to force you to, right? So you risk a lot, but I will tell you that's when it's at risk. I've sold a lot of doggone homes, and I think I've only had one person ever lose their escrow deposit. They knew they were going to lose it, and they still wanted to move forward, right? So it's really rare. It doesn't happen that often, and when it happens, it's usually happening because somebody decides for it to happen, right? So there's your escrow deposit. You can also level up in escrow deposit world, right? Maybe you're giving $5,000, $10,000 down, whatever, and you're going to bump it up to $20,000. Okay, awesome. That makes people feel better. And listen, if you're on a 450 and you're putting 20% down, that's $90,000 down. If you've already got the $90,000, which you should, if that's the offer you put in, you could put up to a $90,000 deposit down, right? They're going to use the deposit for anything you want to include your down payment. So it doesn't really affect you at all, but it shows that seller you're more serious. It just feels better. As an agent, I know it really doesn't mean a whole lot because you're probably going to get it back anyway if you have a contingency to protect you, but it's just better optics. Just is, right? But if you want to level up, you can make it guaranteed, or you can make a portion of it guaranteed. So maybe you want to put down $20,000, $5,000 guaranteed. So now if you've got two offers, you're the seller. And one of the offers is $450 and the other offer is $445. Both have inspection contingencies, but one has $5,000 in guaranteed escrow, and it's the one that's $5,000 less. Now you've got a choice to make. I can go after the $5,000 more, but they can get out for any reason during the inspection period. Oh, by the way, you might have a 2022 home and you're thinking, this house doesn't have any issues. Guess what? It doesn't matter. If they find another home in that 5, 7, 10-day inspection period that they like better, or they get cold feet, or one of them dies, or anything, literally anything, for any reason, they can back out. It doesn't matter how nice your home is. So don't think that because you've got a nice new home, you're in the clear. You're not, right? You've got a certain level of risk with that your realtor should be sharing with you. Whereas with the other one, if they back out, you've got a guaranteed $5,000 cash, and now you can go put it on the market and try to attract another buyer. Oh, by the way, you can probably go get that other buyer if you move fast enough, right? So guaranteed escrow deposit really ramps up the appeal on the seller's end. You might say, well, who the hell would do that? Builders do it all the time. If you go to a builder and you put in a contract, I'll just say this, the majority of builders, more than 50%, are going to require that a portion, if not all, of that escrow deposit is guaranteed. You lose your financing, too bad. You lose your job, too bad. You don't like the inspection, too bad. It doesn't matter. They want it guaranteed. That's just builder world. They don't really negotiate a whole lot. They negotiate, but not as much. And they just don't care. Take it or leave it, right? And they sell enough that they know they can do it. So that's another way to make your offer look better. Now, I will say, if you're going to do that, you better be committed. You better understand fully the risks. What are all my contingencies? What gets me out? What doesn't get me out? What are your options, right? Make sure your realtor explains that before you do it. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm saying make sure you fully understand what you're getting into before that's something you're going to do. Next one, no inspection. This one is up in the air all the time, right? And realtors will go back and forth and say, I would never say don't get an inspection. Well, let me give an example of when I personally, in the house I'm sitting in right now, bought this house and I didn't get an inspection. This home was built in, I want to say it was 05, and I think I bought it 2 years ago, which was 2021. So that would have meant everything was, 16, 17 years old, something like that. So I had a shingled roof, 16, 17 years old. I knew I've got 2-3 years on that roof and I got to get a new roof. Does it really matter if I got to do it in 6 months or if I got to do it in 24 months? Either way, shortly, I need to pony up a lot of cash to get a new roof. So I really didn't care if it leaked. If it leaked, well, then I'm getting it now. If it doesn't leak, well, then I'm getting it in 24 months, right? The AC was 16, 17 years old. I knew most ACs don't last much longer than that. So I might have a year or two left, which I had about a year and a half left, and then it went out. And I'm going to lose my AC. So what do I need to get it checked for? If it doesn't work, I'm in pretty much the same boat. Either way, I'm out the $6 to $7 grand it's going to cost me for an AC. And other than the roof and the AC, there aren't a lot of things that really scare me a whole lot. I can see if there's major mold. I can look at the pool, and my pool was put in pretty recently, and I could see, based on the bottom, that there's nothing that really scares me. Now, am I taking risks? Absolutely. But that girl wanted to put it on the market. It wasn't currently on the market. She wanted to do an open house. I did not want her to do an open house. So by not including an inspection, she knew it was much less risky than any other offer. And I felt like I wasn't taking nearly as much risk because I knew everything was 16, 17 years old anyway, and I was going to have to replace it in the next 2-3 years regardless, right? So for me, I felt like the risk was really low. I say that because there are some scenarios where you would be okay with it, and there are other scenarios where you wouldn't be. It also depends on how comfortable you are with homes. If you're a repairman or a roofer or a cabinet guy, you might be a lot more comfortable with the ins and outs of homes and kind of looking it over yourself. If you're a first-time home buyer, you've never really even looked at a home as an investment or owning a home or anything like that, you might be in a situation where not getting an inspection is a much more risky thing, right? So it's different for everybody. Really, the big thing for me is understanding the risks versus the rewards, the risks of, oh my gosh, what am I not seeing that an inspector would have? And the rewards being, hey, my offer looks better. I could win this when if I had an inspection, I might not. That's it. Risk versus reward. Some people are like, absolutely not. I'll never take the risk. Great. You're going to lose on a couple homes. Are you okay with that? Some people are like, I want to be really aggressive. Great. You're going to buy a home that's going to have some issues that you didn't know about. Are you okay with that? Neither answer is wrong as long as you're educated, right? Next thing. Are you going to go conventional with your loan, or are you going to be FHA or VA? The perception out there is that VA and FHA, because they're government backed, they have an additional inspection at the end when they have the appraisal. And much more often, things get called out that have to be repaired before closing that a conventional offer doesn't have. So if you see two identical offers or close offers, one is conventional and one is FHA or VA, especially if the home does have questionable issues. Maybe it's got $300, $400, $500 in wood rot on the fascia boards. Maybe it's got some cracked tiles that'll pop up. Whatever it is, a lot of those sellers are going to say, I'm just not interested in taking that offer. If you can go conventional and it's worth it and you want to be aggressive to get it, that's one way to do it, right? So that's another way to improve your offer. Appraisal gap coverage, what does that say? Okay, so you buy this home for $450. You're talking about on day one, when you put the offer in, what happens in the scenario where the appraisal comes in, let's say at $440? Am I going to cover that difference with cash? Because the lender is not going to allow me to get a loan to cover the full 450. They're going to say, hey, our loan's based on 440 now, because that's what the appraiser said it's worth. So that other 10 grand, you've got 4 options if you don't have appraisal gap coverage. 1, you, the buyer, pony up that difference in cash, in addition to the down payment and closing costs you've already got. The seller drops the price, in this case, $10,000. Some variation of those two. So maybe the seller drops the price $4,000 and the buyer ponies up another $6,000. That equals the 10 grand. We're good to go, right? Or the fourth option, the deal falls apart, and assuming you've got a contingency protecting yourself, you, the buyer, would get your deposit back. Okay. If you show them appraisal coverage, now if it falls short, you're telling them if it falls up to this amount short, we're going to cover it with extra cash. All right. Now they can feel more confident if their home is 450, especially in a multiple offer situation, which we're still seeing, but not as much. And even when we do see it, we're talking 5, 10 grand. We're not talking 30, 50, 100 grand like we were talking a couple of years ago. In my opinion, thank God, right? It's a much more reasonable market. So when you're coming in with that, you can say, hey, we'll cover up to the first 10 grand in cash. Now, if it comes in 5 grand low, you're covering the 5 grand. 10 grand low, you're covering the 10 grand. 15 grand low, you're covering the 10 grand. And now you're only negotiating the other 5, right? And so that is part of the negotiation. What are we going to do with this other 5? And again, it comes down to the same 4, right? Either they're dropping the price 5 grand, you're coming up with an additional 5 grand on top of the 10 you already promised, on top of the closing costs, on top of the down payment, or a variation thereof. Maybe they cover 2,500 and you cover another 2,500, right? And then the last thing is the deal falls apart, you get your escrow deposit back. Those are the 4 options. But at least you're showing, hey, up to this amount, we've got the cash, we'll cover it if it happens. That's how much we want this house. Okay. Another thing, proof of funds. You should have this on every offer. I've never submitted an offer for a buyer that doesn't have it, but I see them all the time as listing agents. And I'll tell you, as soon as I see an offer and it doesn't show proof of funds, I think either you're hiding something from me or you're an uneducated agent. Either way, I'm not overly excited to work with you, right? That's the perception you build on day one without submitting proof of funds. Proof of funds can be one of 2 things. It can be a letter from your bank that says, hey, Joe needs X amount for his down payment and his closing costs. Let's say it's 50 grand. Joe has at least $50,000 in his bank account, fluid, and then it has 4 things of information, right? It's got the bank name. It's got my name, the buyer. It's got that amount, in this case, $50,000 or more, and it's got a date. All right. It shows today's date or maybe a date in the last week or 2, making me, the seller, comfortable with it, knowing that cash is likely still there. All right. If you're not submitting that, I don't know as a listing agent or as a seller that you have that cash. If you've got it, man, show it. Make that seller as confident as possible. All right. I've heard agents come back to me and say, oh, they're just not comfortable sharing their bank account information with you. I'm not asking for their bank account information. I don't want their routing number or their account number. All I need is a letter from the bank. You can even send me a statement and remove all their banking information. I just need those 4 things: your name, the banking name, a date, and an amount that's at least, in this example, 50 grand or more. If you can't show me that, this is a big transaction, I don't know that you've got the cash, right? And here's another thing. A lot of people will be contingent on the sale of their home. That's where the cash is coming from. But they don't want to tell the seller they're contingent on the sale of their home. So they submit the offer hoping that they don't ask for proof of funds. And then if they do, they try to sell their home. If they get their home sold, cool, they go through with it. If they don't get their home sold, they get denied on financing. They still never told you that their house was, or that their purchase was contingent on sale, but they're declined on financing. And you never know the difference as the seller, right? So a smart seller and a smart listing agent are going to require, they're going to demand that proof of funds up front. Don't make them ask for it. Provide it, right? Pre-approval letter. This is a no-brainer. I'm not even going to go into it. Everybody should know what a pre-approval letter is, right? It just shows me that you've spoken with a bank. Desktop underwriting. Desktop underwriting is a little bit deeper. It's what that lender is doing and inputting all your information. My favorite page is that last page where it tells me what you're required as a buyer to have in cash to cover both your closing costs and your down payment, and what you have fluid available to you. Guys, I've got 3 more things I'm going to go through. If you've got any comments, questions, anything like that, whether you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, feel free to throw them in and I will absolutely respond before the end of this video. Getting into the 10th thing. What the heck does this mean? Look at their walls. Oh, I know what this is. Look at their walls. I've got a great example that I've used several times where I went into this home. I can still see where the home is. Went into this home and it was a multiple offer situation and it just kept going up and up and up and up. And I finally, because I'm a sports fan, I said, hey, to my buyer, do you remember they had all those Jets jerseys and memorabilia and whatever hanging up in that room with the pool table? Yes. I said, because I'm a sports fan, I bet you can go out and get a Jets jersey signed by whoever the current quarterback is. And I bet it would cost you $200, $300, $400, $500. And I bet you that would carry more weight with that seller than coming up $5,000 on price, as silly as it sounds. And they said, no. And I said, can I try it? And they said, absolutely. So I went and found one on Amazon. I forget what it was, but it was $200, $300, $400, $500. Grabbed the photo from the Amazon listing and said, hey, we will give you this if you accept our offer. And boom, it got it done. The agent called me back laughing and said, I can't believe it. But as soon as they saw that, they felt the love. They felt the love. They felt the connection. They thought, man, this is the guy who needs my home. And so they said, yes. I told my buyer instantly, get on there and purchase that jersey so you can send it, right? So we purchased the jersey, closing went through, and at closing, they handed him over the jersey, right? So pay attention to what it is that seller loves. You can see it all over their walls. Maybe they love fishing. Maybe they love sports. Maybe they love whatever. It doesn't matter. But if you can add something that speaks to their heart instead of just numbers and terms, man, that could go a long ways, right? Number 11. I recommend not adding personal property to a purchase agreement, right? A lot of people want to add furniture or artwork or whatever it is. Get the home under contract, man. That's mostly what you're interested in. And if it's not offering furnishings, just get the house. Get the house under contract. Now, once you're under contract, let's try to negotiate furniture, right? So you can go back and say, hey, I'll give you $2,000 for this. No, we require $3,000. I'll meet you in the middle of $2,500. Okay, you got a deal. All right. But you don't want to lose a deal over negotiating on furniture. At least most people don't. So try to keep that stuff out if possible. And then if you really want it, you can negotiate it once you get your offer accepted. And then the last thing is lease back. What's a lease back? I'm the seller. You're the buyer. I want to close, but oh my gosh, this is usually the situation. Not always. I'm nervous about, am I going to find a house that I'm happy with? I'm going to need to live somewhere, and rentals are tough to find. They're expensive. They're inconvenient. I'm going to have to move my things. If you, the buyer, allow me to stay in my house for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, whatever you negotiate, you're essentially a landlord. Now I'm comfortable signing your offer. Again, this is a phone call from your buyer's agent to their listing agent to determine if that's even something that makes your offer more desirable. But if it is, do it. And that might be the thing that wins it for you. And honestly, in a lot of these situations, if you're buying a home that would rent out at $3,500 a month, and they want to stay there for 2 months, you can usually get them to drop the price $7,000, right? 35 times 2, or you sell it or purchase it for full price, but they make you 2 payments of $3,500 a month, whatever it is. A lot of times they'll add that in. So it's enough to at least offset the cost of whatever living expenses you have for 2 months, right? So guys, there are 12 ways you as a buyer can improve your offer if you really want that offer. And again, it comes down to motivation and the individual scenario. Everybody's scenario is a little bit different. Even with a specific buyer, the seller scenarios are different. The markets are different. There's a lot of different things. But if you've got an intelligent, hard negotiating, builds great rapport with other people agent, you are going to be in the driver's seat. Guys, I appreciate you joining me. Have an amazing Friday. Have an amazing weekend. Let's go.